Okay, so the arousal of anger is sometimes a legitimate artistic aim, and every legitimate artwork that has this aim calls intentionally for concrete intervention in the world. I have literally no idea what this means. So I have to break it down. This is what I call sitting on a sentence. All right, so the arousal of anger is sometimes a legitimate artistic aim. So sometimes an artist's goal is to create anger. And every legitimate artwork that has this aim, so this arousal aim, calls intentionally for concrete intervention in the world. So here, I'm going to say that again, even though it's really confusing. So some artists try to create anger, and every time they do this because they want to create anger is because they want to intentionally create some kind of intervention in the world. They want to, create action, right? Even granting that most, so more than 50% of art is concerned with beauty in some way, it follows that those critics who maintain that a concern for beauty is a characteristic of all legitimate art are mistaken. All right. What's our conclusion, Yamira? Oh, sorry. Are you okay? Are you?
Yeah. The conclusion for this one is sometimes legitimate. Even consider. The last sentence after the comma, it follows.
Yep. So it follows that those critics are, and in this case, critics is just kind of like, it isn't necessary, they're being critical of something, but that doesn't mean they necessarily don't like it. They're just saying that they are someone that, like the evaluator. So the evaluators who maintain that a concern for beauty is a characteristic of all legitimate art are wrong. That's what our conclusion is. And this one I think is kind of crazy because do we have any support in the world in this argument ever that talks about why something is like do we have any support for why beauty is not a part of all art? There's a huge gap here. We go from talking about being anger, legitimate art creating anger in people and people that are angry to go do something to, but not all art has to be beautiful. Like, there's a huge gap. What kind of question is this, Yamira, and why do we know that it's that question type?
It's a sufficient assumption.
Mm-hmm. And why do we know that?
Because it says which one of the following is assumed.
Yep, and we have if and assumed. And so what's the goal of a sufficient assumption question?
We want to make the conclusion more likely to be true.
More likely?
Sufficient assumption. No, we want something strong for sufficient assumption.
So not more likely, we want something what?
That guarantees it.
Guarantees it. Excellent. So let's think of predictions here. What would guarantee that not all that beauty does not have to be a part of all art?
Maybe that is subjective to what beauty is.
Okay. I love how you're making predictions like 100% because it is subjective. So, or you're saying like, what is beauty even? What do we know? The only support that we have right now is this, right? This is all we know is that there's some legitimate art that creates anger. And this anger calls for intervention in the world. What could we say about this art that creates anger that would guarantee that not all art has to have beauty? What do you think, Brittany?
So I know, like, somehow it's gonna have to connect, like, anger and beauty, like, somehow.
Right. So what if we said that there's at least one legitimate piece of art that creates anger that does not have a concern for beauty? Because we know that all legitimate art we know that if we know that there's one legitimate artwork that has the arousal of anger that isn't concerned for beauty, then it would guarantee that concern for beauty doesn't have to be all the time, right? So our answer choice needs to show us something that is a legitimate piece of art and does not have a concern for beauty. So go ahead and look through these answer choices and put your answer in the chat. And Brittany, tell me which ones were most tempting for you. All right, so for this one, I'm going to start with B and C first. So B says, only those works that are exclusively concerned with beauty are legitimate works of art. This is kind of the opposite of what we need, right? It's saying like only those that are only concerned with beauty are legitimate. Well, no, like we're trying to say that these people are wrong, so B can't be it. C says works of art that call for intervention have merely secondary concern with beauty. What's wrong with this one, Brittany?
I mean, that just sounded weird to me. Like, I don't know that it's a secondary concern. Like, they didn't talk about the, like, levels of concern.
Okay.
Really.
Right. But but even if it is just a secondary concern, is it still a concern? Yeah. So it's kind of like, okay, we're still talking about art that is a concern for beauty. We're trying to say that there's at least one that isn't a concern for beauty, right? So it can't be C. All right, Yamira, what about A?
A, there are works that are concerned with the beauty, but that are not legitimate works of art.
Why is this one wrong?
I think it's just connecting the wrong things.
More specifically?
We're looking.
What are we trying to prove?
We're trying to prove that we have some art that arouses anger and that.
Okay, well, not aroused. Okay, sorry, not the first one. In the conclusion, what is our goal of the conclusion? I'm breaking it down even simpler for you. What are we trying to figure?
A concern for beauty is a so okay, so a concern for beauty is we're trying to disprove. I'm confused. Disprove the conclusion that art that has a concern for beauty is not legitimate.
Okay, so we're trying to say, okay, so our conclusion is saying that people that think that a concern of beauty is a concern, or people that think that a concern for beauty is a characteristic of all legitimate art are wrong, right?
Okay, so we're trying to find at least something.
At least one what? One legitimate art that does not have beauty.
Yeah.
So why is your answer wrong?
It's telling me the other way around.
It's saying that there are works that are concerned with beauty that are not legitimate arts.
Right.
So your daughter's painting is very concerned with beauty, but it's not a legitimate work of art. Does that help our conclusion at all? No, because we need it to be a legitimate work of art. Do we see that? Because how it says is of all legitimate art. Right. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
All right. E says only works that call for intervention are legitimate works of art. Do we need it to be true that only those that are call for intervention are legitimate? What's the issue with this one? Yumira, do you know?
Not sure. I didn't choose it, but
She's like, don't go on me. I didn't pick it.
It says only works of art that call for intervention are legitimate. That's not what we're looking for.
Why not though? Why? Sorry, I'm really deep. For those that I'm really diving deep. I really want us to figure out like why are these wrong? Why does this not prove our conclusion?
It doesn't tell us anything about beauty. So
yeah,
we
excellent.
talk about that.
Because like only works that call for intervention are legitimate works of art. Well, all of these could have a concern for beauty, right?
Right.
You don't know. So excellent. Great job, Yumira. That was great. All right, and then our answer is D. No works of art that call for intervention are concerned with beauty. Why does this one work? Because we know that sometimes a legitimate artistic, so we know that there's legitimate art that creates this anger, right? And every single legitimate art, so every legitimate art that has this aim, intentional or calls for an intervention in the world. So every legitimate artwork calls for this intention into the world. And so if no works of art that call for intervention are concerned with beauty, there has to at least be one legitimate artwork that is not concerned with beauty, right? That was tough. But that's why D's, so it's connecting what we know in our premise or our support with our conclusion. Do you see that, Yamira?
Yes, but
Okay.
I don't know. I almost felt like some of the premises, like we didn't even need. I don't know. It was just so wordy to me. I just couldn't.
So wordy. That Brittany, you got this one right. How did you do it by process of elimination or did you really like D?
Also, I don't know. Apparently, I must have just been amazing that night because I really don't even know. I just did this again and got the wrong answer. So